All right, well, John, you already know. I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. My name's Lara. I'm the customer success lead for CleverTap, which means I basically work together with a lot of apps, different ones, gaming ones, subscription ones, e-commerce ones, and basically helping them to retain their users, make their app custom for each of their users. And what I'm coming across quite often with my customers working on their strategies is the following emotions, let's call it. So maybe you've come across those as well. Do it, John.
So yeah, for those of you who weren't here at the last panel, I'm John. I'm a solutions engineer, which means I'm not really an engineer, but I help our customers find solutions. So we focus on retention, on the retention side of things. And what I spend most of my time thinking about and working with brands and apps is defining their use cases and helping them achieve their basically build their CRM and engagement strategies, whether that's through messaging and through customizing the app itself.
Exactly. All right, so what we will talk about is leveling up monetization, especially without a PhD. So how can you make use of what you have in your app in order to drive monetization? And as I said, like working together with a lot of different app teams, maybe marketing teams, product teams, growth teams, monetization teams, I think all of them share similar thoughts, which we gathered on the next slide. So one of them, and maybe you feel the same sometimes, it's kind of like this emotion when you're asking for access to your data science team, if you have a data science team. If not, you might be kind of like, yeah, okay, feeling like this guy. If you want to perform audience analytics, you're kind of like lost there. Another one is when it comes to, all right, I need the right tools or I need any tool in order to automate my lifecycle marketing, and you basically don't have anything, then you might feel stuck like this one here. Another emotion, and I think that's quite familiar for everyone, I guess, is when you ask for budget to run, for example, promotions, or you want to create live ops, and there's basically none. And last but not least, when you try to involve your developers, you're a marketing team, let's say, and you're trying to involve your developers into an A/B test, and they basically don't really have time for you. So the question is, what do you do if all those things are missing? One answer to it is?
Or just one of those things.
Or one of those things, that's true. Well, what you do have is data. You are collecting data throughout the user life cycle, and there's data that you're using for certain activities in your app, but there's also data that you might know, but it's super silent, so you don't really have any access to it. Data that is not considered, like you're not actively using it, data that is hidden somewhere, or basically data that nobody knows of, that you're collecting it. But all that data is what empowers your monetization, what is empowering your team. And John is going to tell you how.
Sure, and it's so common that through the use case definition, defining objectives, KPIs, customers realize, apps they identify data that they didn't know existed. Daniel was talking about in the last panel, something as simple as IP address to identify geography. Just by having an app, there's at least some basic data that you can easily identify and use to segment and personalize, and then you can also, from that exercise of defining use cases, then figure out what is required to actually unlock those use cases and work backwards. If there's something missing, you can add that to the roadmap. You can find ways through the user's journey to actually solicit that information. Uh-oh.
Now we got stuck.
There we go. What we see is what helps the for lack of a better word, the weaponization of this data is having a place to actually store it and apply it. So being able to have those user attributes, their events, and details on those events, whether that's purchase activity, gameplay, subscription activity, engagement, and consumption of content, and to have simple ways to, one, just understand what your audience is doing in general, and then how that varies by segment, and then to apply that, whether that's to your marketing campaigns, push notifications to do promotions outside of the app and the game, communications inside of the app, email, remarketing across various social channels and so forth. And then, when possible, to extend that to actually customize the app experience itself and actually customize the code. So once you have that data, I think it's important to figure out what is relevant, and then take it a step further and segment it. So traditionally, that requires some pretty powerful tool and a smart person to use it. Whether you're writing Cheetah, SQL, some other queries, and that not everyone has the resources to do that. So being able to construct, to ask questions. What are the most important dimensions for segmentation, and then really flexibly, without having to reconstruct queries, being able to visualize and action on what are those dimensions that actually have the reach behind it, and then what then being able, in the same movement, essentially in the same gesture, then to apply that to a push promotion to a live ops event, and whether that's audience activity in the app, flows and funnels. Whether those are conversion events and subscription events, or metrics that you're kind of defining yourself. And then different types of segmentation, again, that in a perfect world, you have at least one or two data scientists who are performing regression analyses. But in the absence of that, being able to identify with flexibility the events that you want to use to define your whales, your minnows, and everyone in between, and action on those. Psychographic segmentation, recency and frequency, and monetization. Date time, making reference to, understanding when people are converting the most, and inactivity.
All right, so now you should be at the stage where you not only identify all your data, but you also put it in different segments. So it could be your champion users, the churning users, users that have a certain behavior. So you got a very good understanding of what is your user base. And I think that's also what we heard in the panel discussion before. That is really key. You need to understand your user base in order to actionate on it. So that's really the next step. So you've got those segments cleared out. So how do you actually guide your user through your app experience? There's multiple ways. There's a lot of ways, a lot of scenarios how you can guide them through it in order to have the perfect user, let's say. John, just go one slide back. Oh. Not finished yet. But that would be, just a general one to say, okay, there's different scenarios that we need to go through. First one would be onboarding. So I think also Roy gave this example of you go into the gym, you're super motivated, you want to train your muscles, but you're not really sure which machine to take, or what routine, or how often, or just don't know, in other words, how to use the app. So that's the onboarding. You need to guide your users through the app, explain where to find what, how to utilize it. And that's where, for example, in-app communication comes into play. So you have different pop-ups for different user segments to educate them on what your app is doing. The next step is then, and going back to the gym example, where you need to keep up the engagement. So you educated the user, you need to engage them, make them part of your app, because only if they feel all right, I'm trusting this app, it brings value to me, I want to use it, that's when engagement starts kicking off, and that's when you really have a valuable champion user. Next steps is really to say, all right, on one part, you do want to have some conversion on this user. So if you're a monetizing app, you've got a subscription, you've got in-app purchases, now is the best time to engage this user in that kind of monetization, driving the dollar signs, but also driving loyalty. So not only you want to have educated and engaged users, but you also want to have a user that talks to your peers, tells about the app, promotes it, because that's when your app usage is going to grow. And last but not least is about retention. So you do want to keep those users. You want to make sure they're staying in your app, staying in the gym, as we had this example earlier on. So you need to catch them at the right time with the right communication. Talking about communication, that's when we go to the next slide, John. It's really inside and outside of your app. So there's a few channels that are inside, which I guess is the best way to communicate with the user, because they're right now using your app, so that's the moment of time that you want to talk to them. That could be an in-app, it could be a web push, it could be native displays, or you're really catching them at a certain stage within your app. But if they're going to kind of like hibernate, going more into the churning mode, you also do want to engage with channels that are outside the app. So maybe a push, maybe an email, maybe an SMS. And I think the key here really is to synchronize those channels. So if you're building a user journey, onboarding, engagement, whatever it is, it needs to involve all those different channels and make sure that you're catching them at the right channel at the right time, branching your journey, merging your journey at certain stages again. So really understand your user and catch them where and when and on what channel you want to talk to them.
And so far, we've been talking about the use of your data for audience discovery and segmentation, understanding your high-value users, your core and casual users, and then having those events for triggering whether it's a one-off promotion or life cycle messages at the right time during the user's journey or during their session. The next, the last level is actually personalizing the content, both of that messaging activity, but also the app itself. And this is one area that I've seen, especially for folks in marketing and growth marketing, being able to really have an impact in their organizations and into their brands in ways that maybe they didn't expect initially. Being able to cascade the cascade the experience that, or rather, the insights that they find on how users behave in general, about how their audiences behave in general, and then how that varies by subsegment to actually personalize and remotely configure different experiences in the code itself without having to be coders, developers themselves. So I'm not going to talk through every single step in the user journey here, but some questions that I think are really relevant to answer or to ask rather, and think about is the experience that you're providing at each step of the user journey customized and mindful of what you're doing on the messaging side as well as what you're doing on the code and product side. And we're almost at time, but lasting thought, and this is not rocket science. I think it's intuitive, but to the degree to which you're able to identify the data assets that you have to add to that list of attributes, events, event properties that you can then use for segmentation, triggering, and personalization. When you get to message and product personalization, there's an unsurprising but corresponding impact, an increase in revenue. So being able to democratize that segmentation, the audience discovery, and then the application of that data is definitely a very good use of your time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.